Record. Hmm. Okay, so welcome back. So in the first part of this particular podcast, we talked about the basic interview prep and those things, and we have a guest Mithun Kotian also. So and kind of started on the resiliency engineering part, and we were discussing about the basic engineering resiliency introduction and those things. And yeah, yes, Mithun. So we can start.
Yeah. So as we discussed about resilience engineering from QA tester, how to basically become a resiliency expert, or rather not expert, but just a resiliency practitioner. Um, One thing that you need to know is like the technical side of things. You basically need to be aware like what exactly you're testing, how it works, like what the internals are. So once you know about these internals and how they work and what can go wrong, you can tell others ki what to do when stuff goes wrong, right? Or rather, you can brainstorm with somebody. You can tell them that, okay, cache, if the cache basically goes down for 5 minutes, our application degrades to degrades to this much amount, right? It starts taking seconds instead of milliseconds, and so on, right? So all of this you can basically only by the power of your observation, the power of your knowledge, can you basically get into something like this. And it is true for almost every sort of non-functional role. A functional role is more in terms of logic, business, and all of these aspects, thinking like a user, like what will inconvenience the user, how to basically get out of it, and so on. uh, but in terms of like the non-functional roles, it's always in terms of like what is going to break, right? How to break it, how to make sure that it does not break. So if you think of performance, security, even resiliency, chaos, even accessibility for that matter, and so on. So you basically think in those terms, कि कैसे it is not going to work or something like that, right? So that sort of mindset has to be there. While I've always maintained that it is difficult to do this sort of technical wala stuff, I find it more difficult to do the functional side of things. Basically, just because of the amount of focus that it takes is quite a lot, right?
Okay.
Uh, for me, personally, all of this comes a little bit more naturally. Thinking in terms of system design and thinking in terms of what how things work and what breaks and so on, and bringing the other side of things, functional is sort of more the harder for me at least to do,
Okay.
mainly because of the focus that it takes and the way you have to basically keep at it and so on.
Okay. Yeah, it's your perspective, I think, and
Yeah.
maybe
Others will
that's
maybe disagree, yeah, but yeah.
okay. I agree to disagree, but yes. Okay. So before we deep dive on mostly on the theory part, why not to take one simple example,
Hmm.
maybe one generic example. It's an e-commerce website,
Hmm.
e-commerce portal. Of course, it's a very huge. So in that, let's take one or two modules and let's break it up. Let's say there are 5 to 6 components. Of course, database, front end, back end, and the Redis and those things, and maybe one or two stuff. And then how do we approach as a resiliency uh, testing?
So let's put it in terms of like e-commerce, the site itself, right? So e-commerce basically thrives on searching stuff and then basically buying it, right? Cart में डाल के and so on. Now, what is more important is something that you have to map in this. Like, is search more important? Is the cart system more important? Is payment more important? And so on. Like, if you basically say that payment is the most important thing, but if somebody is not able to search on your site,
Exactly. Yeah.
how can they get to the product that they want to actually put in the cart and then pay for it? Right? और इफ यू से दैट ओके पेमेंट से ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट कार्ट है, कार्ट में वो दिखना चाहिए एंड सो ऑन, अगेन कार्ट में है पेमेंट नहीं हो पा रहा है तो छोड़ के चला जाएगा,
Yeah.
right? So all of that has to be prioritized. Ki what exactly do you want to be working at what point of time? Now, payment, for instance, is always going to be dependent on third parties, right? So in that place, monitoring of third parties becomes important, right? You might have seen sometimes when you're doing payments, it will say low success rate and so on. That is a way of
Yeah.
negating failure at their end, right? They have seen that जब भी वो होता है तो दे सी अ लॉट ऑफ ड्रॉप ऑफ्स, सो व्हाट दे हैव डन, दे हैव इंट्रोड्यूस्ड अ sort of way to keep monitoring ki how many of them have passed, how many of them have failed, and then started showing low success rate and so on. That is a way of, they have done their resiliency stuff in that way. They never get to the problem in the first place. जब भी उन लोग लो
Mm.
सक्सेस रेट दिखाते हैं कि दे नो कि वो फेलियर वहां पे बढ़ गए हैं करके, so that's one way of doing things where they have done. So coming back to this particular thing,
So,
right?
sorry. So one point, because it is practical, I want to highlight. Earlier, these payment failures using your QR code apps, whatever, phone pay or Paytm.
Mm.
So earlier payment failure was there if it is there. Let's say typically in demand, in inside places where there is less network or less
Mm.
coverage, payment used to fail. And so nowadays they have improved, I think, and the payment will immediately get reverted
Yeah.
whenever you are in the range, or you get an SMS that it is reverted. So probably they might have looked into this aspect also.
Yeah. So all of these basically are improvements based on failures that they have seen, right? So they are responding to failures. Resiliency is about showing that these failures can happen and how to
Exactly. Oh,
basically build systems that can negate these failures, right? So resiliency is not something that will give you extra features or whatever, but it will help your business in ways where you know ये सब ये होगा, तो what are your cases where this happens, so can you build
yeah.
something around it, right? So all of these things are there. um, to come back to your examples, right? So search is a very important thing. Let's take search in the e-commerce wala
Mm,
thing.
yeah.
Everybody comes, they will go and do the search wala operation. Now let's say search operation takes what, 1 second, 2 seconds, like whatever, how many ever big search it is. So they do a lot of um optimization at that point of time. Caches are involved in this. So one resiliency test in any e-commerce site that you can basically do is bring down the cache,
Mm,
or tell the cache to basically slow down a little bit, right? And you
mm,
see at that volume of requests, what happens to your site, right?
yeah.
Something that used to take 1 second will start taking 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds.
Mm,
And then from there on, other stuff will start slowing down because a site which is loading for 7 seconds, it's consuming some amount of CPU and so on. No? So CPU will basically increase, your RAM usage will increase, your connections will be limited to that particular thing, right? So if somebody holds on to a connection for 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds, right? That is one more person who's not getting that particular connection. So your connection pool will might degrade over time, right?
mm,
So all of these things will actually cause sort of some or the other issues. Now, whether your system can handle those issues is a different matter, right? Ki, somebody holding on to a connection for 5, 7, 10, 15 seconds is okay with you. जो पहले 1 सेकंड में हो जाता था आपका काम. Is that okay with you? If it is okay, it is okay. Your system is fault tolerant, right?
mm,
But what if it is not? What if this keeps on happening? What if your cache doesn't recover for the next 40 minutes, right?
yeah.
Do you get some sort of alert? तुम्हारे monitoring में दिखाई देता है क्या? Is there a way for somebody to come in and do something to the cache to recover it? If I restart the cache, do I have to restart your application? So all of these are part of your resiliency testing, right? You document all of this, saying that ठीक है cache down हो गया, so this is what I observed. So normally if you start observing this, तो पहले जाके cache को check करो, right?
Yeah. mm,
That would be your thing. And then what happens is when we had this issue, we started building dashboards around those particular things, right? We saw an issue prop up in QA, which we couldn't figure out till we went into production. So what we did was, as a sort of
mm,
backup, what we did was we built monitoring around it. कि ये log आता
mm,
है. So we went and checked, and that we had a counter which basically looked at that particular log. तो ज़्यादा हो गया तो we know that there's a problem coming and so on. Right? So resiliency is not just about bettering it या तो सीधा ये करने का, but it's also about monitoring and all the other things. So when you basically gave me this example, an e-commerce site is a very easy example of this because
yeah, yeah,
first
yeah.
search hai, you basically cannot, if you add to a cart and it doesn't the cart is not there the next moment, right? All of these things will come up. But cart is a
Yeah.
little bit difficult in this scenario, but uh, yeah. But yeah, so I gave you that example of the cache, right? That is a very good example of कि क्या हो
Mm,
सकता है करके. Like normally with these interconnected systems जो microservices में होते हैं, इसमें cascading failures बहुत होते हैं. तो one
mm.
thing goes wrong, then half an hour later that thing causes some other thing to go wrong,
Exactly. Yeah.
and
It's a
then
cascading effect.
yeah, and if you don't catch it at the start, right, then you will be, instead of focusing on one particular subsystem, you'll be focusing on three different ones, and there's a good chance that your debugging stuff goes awry. So
Mm. So one thing I want to highlight for the search, but at least the thing, apart from this e-commerce stuff, so typically I observed this on LinkedIn. Typically, let's say the peak time, like morning, 10 o'clock, something, 8 to 10, and then evening, they are pretty fast. But then in the afternoons or something, they're pretty slow. So, I mean, it's okay if it's not like a,
hmm,
very high priority or this thing. But for e-commerce, typically that matters
yeah,
because
that
that
matters.
that that affects your sales, that affects your revenue and everything. And especially this Gen Z, they don't want to wait. Even if even if you give it 100 rupees discount or 10% discount, if it is not there, that's it. You go to different site and then you buy it maybe for a increased
Yeah,
price. So the thing is, it is very important. Let it be a search, let it be payment, let it be whatever. So that things are important. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Continue. You want
yeah.
to
So all of these are
have?
like eventual like business. These affect business, right? Any slowdown, any downtime, etc. So you need to basically figure out like if it is worth it or not, right? And if you truly have much confidence in your system, that much confidence ki, you can go without doing all of these sort of performance or non-functional tests and so on, right? In general, resiliency will be done by mature sort of companies, right, who have gone to, or who have gone to some sort of trouble. But it's a overhead in terms of like the people who are needed to do this kind of thing are also not very uh, widely available. One, although it seems like I'm basically saying that yeah, what's there, but no, widely available in the sense that you need to then devote a developer or a SRE or a DevOps person who could be doing extra feature development and so on. Right. Normally that is what will happen. But if you or even a QE resources are getting rarer basically because of
Yeah,
shrinking teams. So even that is a little difficult. So it's money that you basically are putting on the table just to make sure that your uh, whatever your site is or whatever your business site is or etc. does not go down and does not have too many disruptions.
yeah. I mean, see, it has a business value, and of course, it is probably um, I would say money saving, but maintaining the customer base, having them available, or there's a workaround, something sort of that. If that is developed with these efforts, that will save a lot of dollars, I would say, upfront, and will save a lot of your customers' pain and those things. So it is really important to do this and have things ready if something goes down. Okay. Yes. Now, technical deep dive. So, of course, the tooling and how to and when to. So, yeah. Can you talk about the
So
circuit breakers?
circuit breakers, retries, timeouts, um, these are all ways to ensure that resiliency is maintained, right? So, uh, so one good example is if you are reaching out to a different service, right, and the service is not responding properly. So instead of bombarding it with more requests, you basically back off a little bit, right? That's a circuit breaker. So you basically figure out कि ठीक है मेरा database नहीं चल रहा है. I will not bother it for the next 1 minute. Maybe it will bring up, maybe it will come up on its own, right? Or somebody will notice that it has gone down. They will restart it. Uh, those
Hmm.
circuit breakers basically work in that way. They basically keep a health check on whatever you are dependent on, and then work it. So testing a circuit breaker is the tougher part because
Hmm.
you need to know like how it works, what the parameters are, how to basically invoke those sort of parameters. Right? There have been so circuit breakers. They normally work in just like a circuit breaker, right? Uh,
Yeah.
like at your home, something short circuits, your circuit breaker just strips, right? So
Hmm.
here it's
Yeah.
the other way around. Your circuit breaker is always closed. When it is closed, everything works fine. When it is open, uh, the requests are not sent through, right? So it then checks. So you need to know कि कब open होगा और open होने के बाद close होगा भी कि नहीं, right?
Hmm.
Which is another problem that we actually had in a real world situation where
Hmm.
the circuit breaker worked, but it never closed. So you anyways have to go and
Okay.
reset anyways. But then
Hmm.
retries and timeouts are also similar, right? But retries are like uh, आप retry डाल तो दोगे, but if the retry is not spaced properly, then even that is of no use. So for instance, there was one place where we had a retry on a database call, right? So if the database call does not go through, we try it again 2 or 3 times, right? But uh, if it happens within 10 milliseconds, it's of no use, no? It has to happen
Hmm.
after 1 minute, the retry. So you have to test all of these things. कि डाल तो दिया है, but how to basically
Hmm.
figure out कि वो चल रहा है नहीं चल रहा है and so on. Uh, Similarly, timeouts and all timeouts, exponential timeouts, back of algorithms बहुत होते हैं. So
Hmm.
all of these things you need to understand as a resiliency tester, right? Somebody who's see how these things work is there's a library of resiliency stuff that the developer will just put in, वो कुछ values डाल देगा config में. You need to check कि वो चलता है कि नहीं करके, right? And you
Yeah.
need to be
Yes.
very aware of कि ये वाला value क्या करेगा. Like for instance, circuit breakers will have like I think around 20 उसके अलग अलग ये होते हैं,
Hmm.
अ,
Hmm.
क्या बोलते हैं, parameters that they can put in, and based on those parameters behaves very differently, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes the circuit breaker never gets engaged क्योंकि the volume is not that much. या तो वॉल्यूम कम है या तो उन्होंने ज़्यादा डाला है and so on. So all of these things you basically need to know about these patterns, and then basically, and now with AI it's become a little bit more easier. You can just put in कि क्या देखना है क्या नहीं देखना है, what the exact errors are and so on, and then you can
Hmm.
design your tests around it. But again, you need to know your own stuff, right? पहले एआई को
Yeah.
पूछने के लिए you need to know that कि वो उधर हो रहा है करके, or how to basically go to that and so on. Yeah.
So, one logical question here. The thing is, so see, we mostly nowadays many companies, especially people who have reached to this selenium, I mean resiliency testing part, they probably are bit high level companies, and we have sophisticated systems. They are using cloud
Mm-hmm.
services like AWS, Azure. So if you are taking a product, let's say some database from Azure or some database from AWS, so we know that we are taking a product which is time tested and we are paying for it. So these companies, they will try to make it, let's say 99% 99 availability. So where does the failure comes into picture? Like we are using ready-made products. So how this happens? Give me an example.
रेडीमेड प्रोडक्ट्स का मतलब ये नहीं है कि इट विल नॉट हैव सम इशू, राइट?
mm,
इट मे गो डाउन इन वन जोन. Let's say you basically have a DB that you have taken, no, AWS ka. The region goes down, so what will you do? Do you
mm,
have like monitoring in place to know that the region has gone down and it has to auto switch, right?
mm,
Or does your system have to put in a new configuration and do the switch and so on, right? So वो disaster में आता है, लेकिन
mm,
resiliency में भी आता है. Basically the system is up. For AWS
mm,
it is up, no, दो जोन चालू है. Uh,
mm,
तो in those cases you basically have to do all of like resiliency. The other
mm,
cases are uh, and it does not have to be like a system like AWS Aurora or something else also. A lot of these teams, right, cost का भी होता है and इसका भी होता है, like easy availability and all the other stuff. तो open source बहुत use होता है. So you'll put
mm.
something which is open source on your machine and it will misbehave and then issues आते हैं. तो जो
Okay.
hosted services होते हैं उसमें कम chances है of them going down. There's a good chance of them misbehaving. Right? Going down
Mm-hmm.
and misbehaving are two different things, right? तो वो misbehave के टाइम पे भी ये सब होता है, right? लाइक कैश उड़ा दिया मैंने सब कुछ, या कैश
Okay.
का मैंने मिस कॉन्फ़िगर कर दिया, राइट? मैंने कुछ डिप्लॉयमेंट के टाइम पे मिस कॉन्फ़िगर हो गया मेरे से, एंड दैट इज
Mm,
स्टार्टिंग अफेक्टिंग द सर्विस. तो हाउ टू बेसिकली look at it, how to basically get to know कि कुछ हो रहा है, whether my monitoring catches it or not and so on. So दोनों साइड से है. Like if you have services which are like highly available, very fault tolerant and everything that you have taken, maybe you don't have to do resiliency testing. But are you always sure that that is going to be the case?
mm.
Right?
Yeah.
Like for instance, if the entire AWS region goes down, what will you do? Do you have a plan for that?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Right?
makes sense. Oh. Okay. Yeah. I mean, being practical, so anything can
Yes.
happen, even if it is
Yeah, yeah.
99.99,
So,
it can
so it is
happen.
not for everybody. वो तो even I agree. Resiliency testing or chaos engineering is not for everybody. It's not for small scale के लिए तो है ही नहीं,
Mm,
right? और if your thing is a monolith sort of application, तो उसके लिए भी नहीं है. It's where complexity is there and where that complexity can actually cause some issues to you. वहाँ के लिए you can basically do something like this.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. So there are cases where it may not be there. There are cases where it is highly demanded, highly required, based on, let's say, for example, banking. Okay. So rush hour, we need to have them available.
Yes.
If non-rush hour,
See,
maybe it's okay.
banking is an example. Share trading is an example, right? Stock markets,
Ah, okay.
millions of dollars at stake, right? They probably have some sort of geniuses working on their algorithms and stuff, right? Who can't even like milliseconds also matter to them, even nanoseconds का range में,
Hmm.
right? For them, something going down, something even degrading a little bit is a big problem. तो उनके लिए तो करना ही है, राइट? उनको तो
Yeah.
करके देखना ही है ना, व्हाट हैपेंस इफ अ सिस्टम sort of stops responding or starts degrading and so on.
Okay. Yeah. Critical
Critical, yeah.
example.
Critical,
Stock market.
there's so many stock markets. You have your uh, although nuclear reactors का कोड बहुत बच्चा it could be it would be running on mainframes and stuff. वो अपना as long as it does not come on the modern infrastructure, they are good. But yes, something that is a little bit more critical in nature, no, where lives are at stake or this thing is at a stake. Um, Lots of money is at stake. That is one thing. One good example of this is ब्रिटिश एयरवेज का दो तीन आउटेजेस हुआ था. One outage was simply because somebody some electrical malfunction in their data center, no, that caused a rolling restart of all these services, and then they had to go in and fix them by hand or something like that. And
Hmm.
that was तीन दिन का outage or something.
That Cloudflare you're talking, right?
Not Cloudflare. This is British Airways. This has been going on since 2000s. So,
Okay, okay. Huh.
right. So resiliency is not just there, it is also on the physical side of things. Uh, there was one in which network basically uh, there was an electrical problem in a data center, which is this is not British Airways, this is something else, where they had the redundancy in place. So network switches होते हैं basically on each uh, region or each rack of this thing. So there were two, the primary and the secondary, but both were connected to the same electrical outlet, right?
Okay.
And the electrical outlet blew. So both of them went down. The half the data center went down because of that.
Hmm.
Because nobody can reach the servers itself, right? Because there is no network switch.
Hmm.
So so those kind of things are also resiliency only, right? It was not resilient in the true sense of things. So it's not
Got it.
just I talk more about software resiliency because I do that. But there are other things also, right? That you have to basically take a look at your hardware stuff and so on.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Good examples. Moving on. So, designing for high availability and versus fault tolerance.
Okay.
So it is a good debatable question. Somebody may agree left side, somebody may agree right side. So let's talk about it.
So that totally depends on how much you can spend also, right? High availability basically means that you're putting more servers in place, right? But think of uh, if you know pricing of AWS databases, for instance, how much it costs per minute to keep like a large database on a per minute basis or per hour basis. A small scale company cannot do high availability always. So they have to go for fault tolerance. कि ये database थोड़ा टाइम के लिए डाउन गया भी तो I can manage with the cache or something like that. Right? Half of my site will not work, but at least the other half is working, no?
Hmm.
Right? So uh, in terms of e-commerce, I can basically say that you basically have a database issue. So people may not be able to go put stuff into the cart or retrieve their cart or do the payment वो invoicing के लिए और वो सब, but they should be able to do search because that can be pulled from a cache, right? You can do it from a cache or something like that, and while you basically switch, right? तो there's minimal amount of disruption, whereas high availability के time पे जैसे ही database को कुछ हो जाता है they can just switch over, right? Because money is no object at that point of time,
Hmm.
right? So you basically, depending on what your budget is, what your architecture is, what your constraints are, none of them are wrong things, but both of them have their own things, right? कि fault tolerance कर दिया तो maybe you save some money about on like high availability and so on,
Hmm.
right? High availability के लिए servers रखना या ये करना. Fault tolerance basically will work in other ways where you can design your system around redundancies in your software itself, right?
So when we talk about high availability, does it inherently not cover the fault tolerance? Of course, we have a workaround like if some server, some DB is down, so we can roll some new instantly or something, but then we have to have somebody to work on it automatically or manually to see what has happened to the first database or first system and then make it up and running.
Okay. Yes, it does. But again, it's mostly about your cost and what you want to do, right?
Hmm.
High availability से fault tolerance आता है, as you basically said, but it comes at a cost,
Hmm.
right?
Okay, okay, got it. Okay, so
So yeah,
right, I think in the interest of time,
yes.
let's see what else we can talk about. Gremlin fault injection. So these are again tooling thing.
These are two
So if
links. So Gremlin, the the companies being there by itself says ki resiliency testing is there somewhere, right? And there's a market for it, right? Gremlin being there, or AWS fault injection service, or
mm,
LitmusChaos, or there's others like that separate tools. Chaos Blade करके एक tool है, right? There is another one called Chaos Toolkit, right, which is
mm,
another open source thing. So all of these will do similar things. Like Gremlin is a little bit more agent based. It is quite good at what it does, and it is very visual. So you don't
mm.
really need to know too many internal things to do it. AWS fault injection, you need to know AWS well to design all of these things and run them against the system. But again, it is a little bit more. Litmus Chaos और Chaos Toolkit या तो बाकी कुछ यूज करते हैं तो you need to know the internals on how they work and how what you are exactly targeting. For me, I basically try to use some open source tools to do network manipulations, small scale में, because I'll probably use a Docker instance or I'll use a VM to basically do all of these testings to figure out कि क्या नहीं चल रहा है, क्या चल रहा है, and so on. Right. So there's a lot of things. You can basically start off with open source tools and then move on to all of these things if your company can afford it. Gremlin is quite costly. FIS is there, but again, it's a AWS thing. You will
Mm,
already have some amount of money lying there. Then.
mm. So which open source tool you mentioned?
There is Chaos Toolkit, which is
Chaos
open
Toolkit.
source. Toxyproxy is a good tool.
Mm,
That's a network manipulation ka thing. Then there are yeah, Toxyproxy is the one that will be normally used quite a lot. इसमें क्या होता है
mm,
there's a thing called blast radius. So not every time I can go and just switch off a machine, no.
mm.
So instead of switching off a machine, I can make sure that the service thinks that the machine is down basically because it cannot connect to it. So
Okay.
something like Toxyproxy allows you to do that. Same with Litmus Chaos or the same with uh, Chaos Toolkit and so on. Even fault injectors, if you're on AWS, if you're on Azure, there's a Chaos Studio that they have
Mm,
that you can basically use. So if you're on a cloud services provider, it is much better that you use their own system, sort of, because it is tooled for that only, right? But if you don't
mm.
have money to spend on that, you can basically use the open source stuff.
Yeah. So start with open source just
Yeah,
to explore.
and
Uh, mm,
get to know all of these things.
mm,
Manual testing and observability, right? Uh, so observability is the heart of this. You need to know because when things go wrong, the first thing that has to be done is observability. ही monitoring और alerting करता है आपका.
yeah.
So at the very least, that has to be the one focus that you need to have in resiliency testing. कि वहाँ पे दिख रहा है कि नहीं दिख रहा, whatever is happening. If नहीं दिख रहा है तो आपका डेवलपर को बोलो कि डालना है, right? When
Mm,
this problem happens, you need to send out some sort of logs, and you need to go to your DevOps person, or you need to do it yourself if you are the DevOps person. कि ग्राफाना में अलर्टिंग कैसे करते हैं करके वो सीख लो.
mm.
Add your dashboards, do the alerts, send out emails, whatever, right? And it can be manually done because all of this is manual stuff that is automated, right? Fault injection simulator, Litmus Kiosk, Gremlin, and so on. So manual testing तो करना ही है आपको at the very start. Only then you can go and automate it. That is true of all QE in any case, right?
Mm.
But yeah, you have to manually test your resiliency stuff before you do all of this.
So I'm guessing this is, I mean, we can put automation on it once we know something,
Yes.
whether the failure pattern is repeat or something. We can put,
You can
on
automate,
the,
but what are you trying to automate?
mm,
Right? I have like a half an hour lecture on this, I think. कि क्यों automate कभी करना है, क्यों करना है? Uh, on the topic of resiliency only, कि is
mm,
it worth it to automate? Because it takes time. Because you have to, it's not only about sending out API calls, no? It's also about sending out API calls to the thing that is going to disrupt your network, right?
mm.
और you have to basically stand it up, right? कि उसको डिसरप्ट करना है, ये मेरा कंपोनेंट है और ये मेरा नेटवर्क है, right? So if
Mm.
you want to do that, then yes, you can do automation with this, and everybody will ask for automation, CI/CD में डालो and so on.
Oh,
It
oh.
is not, it is not, but you can design the smaller things to do be automated, and then you can go and check your logs if you can get a API pull or something like that from the logs or something, कि logs
Mm.
में आया कि नहीं करके, या तो alert हुआ कि नहीं and so on.
Okay. So these two things, uh, like automation in terms of course, QE side, we can automate this Toxyproxy and this thing.
Mm.
Next is um, this thing in production. So obviously we can't we want to run automation something in production, but then building dashboards or log alerts, that will be the default thing, right?
Well,
To be
well,
to be.
one of the principles of chaos engineering is you have to do it in production. Right,
Oh,
because
okay, okay.
network conditions are not always the same everywhere, no. So you don't know whether, whatever you do in QE or sorry, QA or whatever you do in staging will work in production or not. So, but again, not everybody can do it. It's very, you know, again, you're trying to save some business some amount of, trouble, but if
Mm.
you basically, uh, you know but if your networking team is quite great, no, they can actually do that. They can do partitioning of the networks in such a way that only 5% of the people actually notice कि कुछ गड़बड़ हुआ है and so on.
Mm.
But why? At the minimum, I'll just say that just do your due diligence, put in your observability stuff in, right?
Mm.
Put in your alerts, monitoring, and so on, and you should be good. You don't need to go and blow up production for that.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense in terms of process and actual testing. But of course, if you want to see the real cost saving or whatever disaster or whatever, that is in production. But then again, that is risk. So if the management wants to take a risk, of course, go for it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we have limited things available. Okay. Yeah. In the interest of time, quickly on the AI ML this thing. Uh,
AI/ML integration for this would be learning about things, right?
hmm,
If something is not working, just try to figure out where it might not be working and so on. And a lot of these AWS fault injection, Gremlin, these have some amount of AI included in them now. AWS में तो normally है. I have not seen tools that totally do this AI wala stuff and everything, but there will be some amount of AI involved in all of helping you do things in those tools. In the open source tools, there's nothing. You can just Google की क्या मतलब Google भी नहीं अभी तो AI में जाते हैं लोग. Just ask an AI कि ये वाला issue के लिए what can you do, and it will give you the result with instructions of what to do and how to do it and so on.
okay.
But
Fine.
again, you need to know your basics. उतना आना चाहिए. Then only you can go and ask, or you can follow also.
Hmm. Fine. Yeah, I think this is very off topic and probably important discussions. So, again, thanks for your time, Mithun.
Sure.
It's again nice to connect with you every time.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. If something comes up, we will discuss more on it.
Sure.